Hi, everybody. Welcome to the last training of this season. It's even though not an official club officer training, we want to wrap it up with Basecamp manager training, which is crucial part of our training. Pathways, new Toastmasters International Educational Program. Whenever I open Basecamp, I feel like a kid in a candy store. So many options, so many opportunities to grow and learn. And I'm pretty positive all your members feel the same way. Having said that, there are few nuances that a Basecamp manager has to know to do their job effectively. Maybe most of you know it, it's a refresher. Maybe some of you are trying to learn what are the shortcuts. Today, we have Ken Braley, our trainer, who has led District 101 as a pathway resource since 2017. He has been helping me in making sure that we provide enough sessions on pathways whenever we hear feedback from all of you. Please help me welcome distinguished Toastmaster Ken Braley to take this forward. Thank you.
Good morning. Get things started here. Today we're going to be talking about Basecamp manager training or Basecamp. If you are a VP education or a president or a secretary of a club, you have access to Basecamp. And I know some of you know a lot about this and some of you may just be getting started with it. So we're going to cover a lot of basics, some of which you'll be familiar with. If you have questions, put them in the chat and Shamala will take care of those, and we'll have some time in the middle along the way to talk over some questions. Let me come over, click on it, whoops. Okay. What we're going to talk about today, the job of the Basecamp manager, that's brief. How do we track member progress in Basecamp? How do we acknowledge achievements? Because that's one of the most important things that Pathways has added to the Toastmasters curriculum. Supporting and teaching members so that they understand how to work with Pathways. Tools and resources, some of which you may be familiar with, some perhaps not. A little bit on pitfalls and challenges. What are some of the challenges that you as a Basecamp manager will run into? And a summary at the end. So as I said, if you have a question, put it in chat and either we'll save it for one of the question sessions along the way or Shamala will interrupt and we'll go from there. So first thing, job of the Basecamp manager. And I see 5 roles for Basecamp managers: administrator, teacher, handholder, guru, cheerleader. Administrator, because you are the person who is going to go in and work with Basecamp to make sure that everything works well and that people get recognition and that people understand how to work with Pathways. Teacher, because your job is to teach people in your club how to work with Basecamp. Some people have said that Basecamp or Pathways is hard to navigate. It isn't really hard to navigate if you're familiar with how it's set up. And so part of the job is for you to understand thoroughly how it's set up and then be able to pass that knowledge on to others. Handholders. Some people are going to need some handholding as they work through this until they get used to it. Guru. You need to be the Basecamp champion in your club, the person that people can come to get their questions answered. So you need to understand thoroughly how it works yourself. You need to be working Basecamp, working your Pathways path yourself, giving speeches, going through projects so that you understand all the steps involved and you can help other people. And cheerleader. Basecamp has gotten some bad press at times since it was introduced in 2017. Some people don't like it, especially people who have been around Toastmasters for a long time and are used to the old system with manuals. It's a new world. Your job as the Basecamp manager is to be the cheerleader in your club. You shouldn't be putting it down. You should be talking it up. So that's the job of the Basecamp manager. So let's talk about some of the aspects of working with Basecamp. tracking member progress, keeping track of where people are in pathways. When you come into Basecamp, this is what you see. A couple of big buttons, and the one in the middle, of course, says member progress. If you click on that, you'll get various displays that you can see. The first one here is called individual progress. Over on the left, it says individual progress, shows where people are in various paths. There's a segment here that says level 1 projects in progress, and further down, level 2 projects in progress. Now, this is not up to date when you come in. In fact, if you look at this in the lower tiny left corner, there's some tiny print, maybe you can't see. It says last updated last August, shows how often this person has looked at this. So the first thing you have to do is go up to the upper right and click on options and then refresh. And when you refresh, it's going to take it quite a while to refresh all of these. It might take 4 or 5 minutes. But when you refresh, now this was updated last week, and it shows level 1 projects in progress and all the people in the club who are working on or who have worked on level 1 projects. When you see one of these graphs up in the upper right corner of it, there's a pop-down menu that lets you view details. And when you view the details, it brings up something that's hard to read on your screen, but it has the graph at the top and some individual data at the bottom. Taking a closer look at the individual data, it shows all the people in the club who have worked on a level 1, in this case, we're looking at level 1 project. I'm in there listed, and you can see that there are 8 projects listed under me, 7 of which are completed and 1 of which is in progress. This is a little deceptive because completed obviously means you completed it at some point. And you can see, for example, this was level 2, not level 1. Introduction to Toastmasters mentoring. I completed it in the dynamic leadership path. I also completed it in the presentation mastery path. And it says connect with your audience is the one project there that's in progress. Now, in progress is kind of a funny term because it means it's been opened. It doesn't mean you actually have gotten in there and worked on it and given a speech. So this is a little deceptive because, for example, on level 3, if we were to show level 3 progress, I'd probably have 13 or 14 different projects in progress. I'm not working on 13 or 14 different projects. It's that I opened them all when I went in for the first time and looked at what each project was. So Pathways thinks that means in progress. So it's a little bit deceptive, but you can get a little information just to see if people have opened projects and have started working on them. Another of the paths, another of the choices you can make in this progress screen is paths in progress that shows what paths people in the club are working on. Here it shows there are 9 people working on the presentation mastery path, 1 person working on persuasive influence, and so on. Again, if you view the details in the upper right-hand corner, you get a similar kind of screen. And what you see here is for each path, each of the 11 paths, who in the club is working on that path. Over on the right-hand column, it shows completion percentage of the curriculum. Now, it's a little hard to figure out sometimes how does that translate from a completion percentage in the whole path curriculum to where is somebody in a path. Somebody who's like 5% in is still obviously working in level 1. Somebody who's maybe 50 or 60% in might be working in level 3 or 4. But one thing that's interesting to see as an example here, this member, it shows that a transcript assigned date, which means when did they open the path, start working on the path. This was a year ago. And it says their completion percentage is 0. This is a red flag. It might mean that they joined and they've never given a speech, but more likely it means that they've given a speech, or in this case, maybe 2 or 3 speeches and never marked them complete in Pathways. So the club isn't getting credit for it, and they aren't getting credit for it. So this is a way to go in and make sure that you know that people have actually actively gotten involved in Pathways and are completing projects. Now we can look up individuals, how we see an individual's progressing. On that original Pathways screen, up in the upper right-hand corner, there's a search box. And as we'll see, you can search on anybody's name in the club. But if you type in club, then what you see as the person listed is the club. And if you click on Club Basecamp Manager, you get the portfolio for the whole club. And there's a button there that says View Team. If you click on View Team, you'll get to see all of the people in the club. And this will take a couple of screens, so I didn't show them all. And you can look at an individual's progress. Something very important when you are looking at the people in your club is where people have set as their home club. If a person is a member of just one club, this is what their screen will look like when they sign into Pathways. It says your home club, and it will show who their home club is, which typically is your club. If a person, however, belongs to more than one club, when they sign into Pathways, this is what they'll see. They'll see a pop-up menu that says select your club. And then they click on that and they'll see the different clubs that they belong to. This is mine because I belong to 3 clubs. At the moment, the one that's selected for me is Speakeasy Monterey Club. That means that the VPE or the Basecamp manager in Speakeasy Monterey can look at my Pathways records. But my other 2 clubs that I belong to, if the Basecamp manager goes in and looks at all the members in the club, I won't show up. If they search on my name, I won't show up. It's only if you are in the same club as the club that the person selected as their home club, you'll be able to see their records. This is a real shortcoming in Pathways, but that's the way it works right now anyway. So if somebody is doing speeches outside your club because they belong to multiple clubs, they may mark them in Pathways, but unless and until they select your club as home club, you won't see those records. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. So back to where we came in to the Basecamp Manager screen. Up in the upper right again, there's a search box. And if you type in a member's name or part of a member's name, you'll see a list of people who match that search criterion. So in this case, I typed in my first name. I'm the only Ken in the club, so I show up. I typed in BRA, and I'm the only person who has the letters BRA in our club, so I show up. And once you select that person, you'll bring up their individual profile. Once again, once you're in an individual profile, you can see there's a button that says View Team. You can go look at anybody else. But what you're most interested in is looking at how a person has progressed in Pathways. And for that, you want to click on Paths and Learning. So Paths and Learning brings up their curriculum just as it does when they go into Pathways. So this is the same screen they will see when they go into Pathways. So if you want to train somebody, or if you're working with somebody who's new to Pathways and you want to show them how to get around in Pathways, you can set up a Zoom session and go through this with them, showing them once they get to this point, all of the steps that you take, they will be able to take in their own Pathways. As usual, to get into a particular curriculum, click on the Open Curriculum and you'll see all of the same things that they would see, what's been completed, level 1, level 2, level 3, and so on. This shows level 1 is 25% complete. One of the 4 projects is done. Level 2 is 25% complete. One of the 4 projects is done. When Pathways started out, you couldn't work on anything level 2, 3, 4 until you'd completed level 1. You had to go in sequence. Now you don't have to. So people can work on advanced projects from the beginning. Over here on the left, it shows the whole curriculum over all level 5, over all 5 levels. You're 14% complete because there's one project done in each of those 3 levels. That's not a useful number really, but it kind of gives you an overall view of your progress through all 5 levels. As usual, if you want to look at a specific level, you can click on the View Details button, and that shows where you are in a particular level, what's been done, what hasn't been done. Again, the curriculum progress is 14%, the level 3 is 34%, and here the required project has been completed, but the elective projects have not. You're all familiar with this, or should be familiar with this, just from working on your own Pathways path. And this is good training that you can submit to, you can work with somebody to show them how to work with their path when they get started in Pathways. Here's a whole different screen. This is something John Webb put together, and I'll show you a link, and then I'm going to put the links in the chat so that everybody can have links to this. This is a template that he put up on Google Docs that shows tracking for each member. And here are the list of a column that shows which path they're on. It uses the 2-character abbreviation that we're familiar with Pathways paths. And then the date that each person has completed that path or completed the project in that path. Interestingly, Pathways doesn't keep track of when you do your speech. It used to be in the old manual system, somebody would fill out the evaluation form in your manual and they'd write the date of the speech. So you could go back through your manual and you'd see the date you worked on every project. Pathways doesn't do that. What it will show when you look at progress, it will show when somebody marked a project complete, but that might be weeks or months after they actually did the project and gave the speech. So keeping a separate track this way or in an Excel file or something like this is really handy. If you want to write this down, you can write this down, or I'll give it to you a link in just a second. I'll put all these in the chat. Let me go over and get that. Over to here. Okay, we'll go over a couple of other links with this as we go through. But this is a really elegant template for how you can keep track of things in Pathways and people's progress. Any questions so far? Has anything been put in the chat, Shyamala?
There was one question, Ken, regarding the horizontal axis and how it is different in each graph because it is not labeled.
This was back in those screens of progress, right?
Yes.
Typically, the horizontal axis is number of people working on a path, number of projects in a path. So it's usually just the horizontal axis is just a number of whatever it is they're tracking. Okay. Stop me if any other questions come up.
Yes, I will.
The next section we want to talk about is acknowledging achievements. This was one of the motivations for starting Pathways as it was structured in the beginning, because Toastmasters found out that in the old system, when you started working on your competent communicator manual, there were 10 projects in that manual, and usually you didn't actually get any acknowledgement until you had completed all 10 and earned your CC. They found that of all the people who started in Toastmasters and started working on projects, there was some small percentage, it was something like 14%, whoever made it all the way through 10 projects and got to the CC. And they thought, we need to give people more acknowledgement as they go through, which is why the projects in Pathways were divided up into 5 levels, and you get acknowledgement after completing each level. So back to Basecamp Manager. When somebody completes a level, they've finished all 3 projects or 4 projects that are in the particular level of that curriculum that they're working on. When they get to the last step, it will say submit for completion. And the Basecamp Manager has to mark that level complete. So what you will see as a Basecamp Manager, the button is pending requests. If any requests have been sent, this is where they'll show up. If you click that button, you'll see a screen like this. It will show the pending requests. And here is a request from one of the members. They've just completed level 4 of the presentation mastery path. And so it shows up here as requesting your attention so that you can mark it complete. And the way you do that, of course, is over here on the right. There's a check mark and an X. The check mark you click on if you acknowledge that it's complete, and the X if for some reason it's not. They may have submitted a request to be complete, and you may go back in your records and say, you know, I didn't see that second speech in this particular level. And they may say, well, I gave that speech at my other club. And you don't have a record of it necessarily. So once you clarify that, then you can go ahead and mark it complete. When you click that box, the check mark, it will give you a chance to put a little comment in if you want to send a comment back to the speaker, but you don't have to do that. Another important thing, I think, with Pathways is when you complete a level, you can get a certificate. This is the same curriculum for the person who just had marked level 4 and was waiting for it to be completed. So we'll take a look at level 3 for this person. Level 3 is complete. And if you view the details, again, they can go in and look at this exact same thing. It shows all the projects in level 3 completion, presentation mastery, and then view certificate. This is what they'll see, and this is what you'll see when you sign in. And of course, when you click that, you'll get to see the certificate of completion. Back in those days, now they can print this out for themselves, but back in those days when we were actually meeting in person, I always encouraged the VP of Education to print this out and present it at a meeting so that people got in-person acknowledgement of the club. Well, this is a PDF, so you can come here and download it, and you can share your screen and present it to them in a virtual meeting just as easily, maybe even more easily. So I encourage, this is a step you should do as the Basecamp Manager, or if you are the president or secretary coming in as Basecamp Manager, send this to the VPE so that they make the presentation at the next club meeting. Another important step in
just a minute, there is a
Sure.
question. How do I upload an evaluation as a VPE for someone who completed speech?
The VPE doesn't upload evaluations. Currently, a member can mark a speech complete without actually giving it. Yes, you are right. That's part of the job of the VPE, is to validate that the person actually gave the speech. You may have to go back into your records for the club and see the meeting notes from a particular meeting to verify that they've given the speech. If they gave it at a different club, you may either have to take their word for it, or you may have to talk to somebody in that other club to verify that they've given the speech. But uploading an evaluation is not strictly something that a VPE does. It's something that not too many people do in Pathways at all. It's possible to upload an evaluation form and have that as a document that can be associated with that member, but it's not a feature that a lot of people use that much. Some people do to keep track of all of their evaluations. It's something that you have to work out with that member to verify that they've done the speech and find out that they have completed it. This is, you're right, this is another quote problem with pathways, is that it's possible for somebody to mark a speech complete even though they haven't really completed it. So it's your job to, as VPE or as the Basecamp manager, to make sure that they've done those steps. There's no single way to do that.
Yeah, and I would like to add a small comment here, Ken.
Sure.
Again, as a VPE or as a club president, you have to say it in your club meetings that integrity is very key for their own benefit. Because if they are cheating themselves. They're not cheating you or cheating the club. So who are they cheating and why are they doing it? Why are they in Toastmasters? What's in it for them by doing it this way? Are they really gaining whatever the project is actually providing, the objectives? If they're not doing it and they're just marking it, uh, again, it has to come back to the basic question: what are they learning out of it? If they're not giving a speech but just marking it.
Mm-hmm. And in my experience, people more often have done this accidentally rather than on purpose. So they were looking through the whole project and they got to the end and they just clicked on those buttons and submitted it, and oh, it's complete now. And usually if that happens, you can just have them go back and give the speech that they would have given so that you know. Okay, so once you have marked somebody complete with a level and given them their certificate, you've done half the job. The other half of the job is to make sure that the club gets credit and that they get credit in Toastmasters for that. There's a Toastmasters website and a Pathways website. And at least right now, the two of them don't speak to each other. So once it's been marked complete, you want the person to be able to get the PM4 or DL3 or whatever it is, acknowledgement within Toastmasters recognition. So where you do that is in the area that all officers work on with Toastmasters. Come to the Toastmasters website and go to Leadership Central. Leadership Central, you should have learned in your officer training, is where you go to update things for the club. And once you're in Leadership Central, Club Central is the place to go. And that's all the information about the club. This is the top of the screen for Club Central. And one of the buttons you'll be able to click on is to submit an education award. Once you do that, click on that, it brings up select a member. You can't submit an award for yourself, but you can submit one for anybody else in the club. If it's an award for you, another officer has to do this. Remember, all club officers can come into this part of Club Central. You don't have to be a Basecamp manager to do it. Select the member. Once you've selected the member, then it will show you select the education program, and it knows what the next available education level or a program for you is. So for example, for me, I printed this screen as I was working on level 1 in the engaging humor path. And so it knows that level 1 of engaging humor is the next thing that's available for me. If I happen to be working on a different path, a presentation mastery path, and I was in level 4 and I'd completed level 4, the next thing it would show me in that pop-down menu is level 5 of the presentation mastery path. So it knows what the next available thing for you to complete is. It doesn't show you every possible level. So you put in the member's name, the project they're working on, review their award and submit that. And then they will have the DL1 or the PM3 or whatever it is after their name. And the club will get distinguished club credit for that. One important point I wanted to come back to. At the time somebody submits a request to complete a level like this, and it shows up in the area that shows requests to be approved, Pathways sends out an email saying, hey, somebody just submitted a request to be completed. Where does that email go? Who gets it? Hopefully you get it. But how does that happen? Again, if you go to the Club Central in Leadership Central and you look at the page for Club Central. Down at the bottom of the page is club contact and meeting information. If you click on that, it shows a phone number, website, Facebook, email for the club. And this email address that Toastmasters has on its record is the address where the notice that they've completed the level gets sent. Now I looked through for District 101, and there are a lot of clubs for whom the address in this box is a member's personal address. Maybe it's the president's address, or maybe it's the VPE's address. Anyway, it's somebody's personal address. And so that's who's going to be getting the notices. So I recommend that you not have a personal address in this box. What we did in this club is we created a special Gmail address just for the club. And then we went into Gmail and had that address forwarded. Forwarded where? 3 places. To the VP Education. So if a notice comes in of a level completion, it'll go to the VP Education. A second one to the VP Membership, because if a person goes to the Toastmasters website and asks to have some information sent to the club, it goes to that address. And often that's a request from somebody who wants to know more about the club, and the VP Membership should get that. And also to the president, so the president can make sure the other 2 are doing their job. So we have this forwarded. There are other clubs who have set up a Google group address, and they have it go maybe to all the officers or to just those 3, and they put the group address in here. So any messages to the club go to that group address. Either of those works, but I encourage you to have something other than somebody's personal address in there to make sure that the right people are getting all the messages that Toastmasters sends out. Any other questions?
None at this time, Ken.
Okay, great. Supporting and teaching members is another job of the Basecamp manager. And this, particularly for new members when they're just getting started in Pathways, is one of the most important things you can do, is to help them become familiar and comfortable with working with Pathways. Coaching sessions, it's so easy on Zoom these days. We're all on Zoom to get together with somebody and work through. I mean, I used to get together with people in a coffee shop with a laptop and we'd go through it. But if they have Zoom and you can do it from home and they can do it from home, it works really easily. And you can go through as often as you need to help them. And if they're stuck, they can show you where they are and where they're stuck, and you can help them directly that way. So it's become much easier with these online virtual ways that we have of dealing with this kind of session. Navigation is an area that some people complain about until they get familiar with how Pathways works and what the structure is. So helping people with that is important. Pathways evaluations, and we'll look at those in a little bit more detail in just a second. Understanding how evaluations are done in Pathways, both how to receive it and how to give an evaluation, is important. And it's not something that most new members have any familiarity with. And then places members get stuck. You'll see as you work with members, there may be a couple of places where people get stuck, and you'll know to automatically talk about those. We'll hit one later when it talks about completing a project. Let's talk for a minute about evaluations. We're all familiar with the evaluation form or the evaluation resource that Pathways calls it. A member needs to know where to find this. Well, if they're giving a speech, you can let them know, of course, that in their project, as they work through a project, they can see at some point in the project the evaluation resource, a link to it. It's the PDF. They should open up that resource, download it, send it to their evaluator so that the evaluator can fill it out and send it back. So within every project, there's a link to the evaluation resource for that project. But that doesn't always happen. The speaker doesn't always send it. And so if you are an evaluator, where do you go? When somebody signs into Pathways, this is the first camp they'll first screen they'll see, and I've covered up a little bit of it. If they want to go to their transcript in their curriculum, there's a button on the left that says Paths and Learning, and the button right below it says Speech Evaluations. If you click on that Speech Evaluations button, you go to a screen that has a picture. It has a listing of all the projects and pathways. I forget how many there are now, 65, 70, something like that, but they're all there. And so you can find the one that the person you're evaluating is working on, click on the link and download the PDF yourself. I encourage Basecamp managers starting out somebody with a new pathways path when they first get involved to go to the screen so that they're familiar with all of that there are evaluation resources for all the projects. But also up in the upper right-hand corner, there's a link to the How to Evaluate tutorial. All members should go through this. It's about a 15, 20-minute video, really. And all members should go through this, particularly new members, because what it does is it talks about how to fill out an evaluation resource form. And what does a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5 mean? Lots of members treat the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like a grade in school. And so if somebody does a really good job of giving a speech, somebody will give them a 5. This was a wonderful speech. That's not really what it means. If you look here, for example, at clarity, their spoken language is clear and easily understood. If they give a clear speech and their spoken language is clear as you would expect it to be, that is an accomplished level. That's really a 3. If they're especially clear in some manner, maybe they get an Excel. To me, a 5 means you walk on water. You can't improve in any way. You are the exemplar for that quality in your club, and everyone should look up to you. So I don't give out 5s very often. I'll often give out 4s if somebody does a particularly good job, better than average. But if they've done a competent job, 3 is the number that should be assigned. And the tutorial talks about that. And it has a model of a speech. A person gives different sections of a speech, and it asks you in the tutorial, how would you rate that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then it shows what somebody who's familiar with this system would rate it. So you can get a comparison between how you would evaluate and how somebody familiar with the Pathways evaluation system would rate it. It's a worthwhile tutorial. So these are areas of training that you can do. Before I get into tools and resources, I saw a few things came up in the chat. Is there anything you want to bring up, Shamala?
There is one question about how do we evaluate if restricted by English as a second language?
Does that mean the speaker has a different language or the evaluator has a second language, or both?
I think it's mostly for the evaluator, if I understand this right.
Okay. Why don't you take that one? You might be more familiar with that than I am.
Shabir, typically it is based on your understanding and how you can evaluate. Again, the whole idea is that we learn as an evaluator, and the speaker also learns from your evaluation. So just instead of keeping the rating as a number, always give feedback for each of them. Some of the best evaluations that I have seen when I'm working on my pathway projects is for each of the categories, some of the evaluators wrote what can be improved. I think that is where you will add a lot of value, even though English is not your primary language. And most of us have that issue as well, to figure out, say, for example, grammar or sentence formation. Some of these are hard to evaluate given that English are second language, but that's okay. Based on your understanding, based on how you perceive it, you are evaluating it. I would say keep improving.
Thank you. Yes. And it's important on this form that people do fill out the comment area over on the right if there are additional feedback other than just a number. It's helpful to give some additional words as to why you gave them the number you gave them. And yes, it is subjective. Okay, tools and resources. If you are a Basecamp manager, some things that you ought to know about. The first one, and a really good resource, is the District 101 website. And I'm sure you're all been here, lots of time here. Come over to the resources section and the drop-down menu, pick Pathways. The Pathways page on the District 101 website has a lot of good stuff in it. You should be familiar with it. Your members should be familiar with it. One thing it shows is all 11 paths. And if you click on a path, you get to see all the levels and all the projects in each path. You can click on each project and see what the objectives are. So you can get a lot of familiarity with what is in each path. A new member, you may encourage them to look through some of these before they pick a path, perhaps, and let them see what some of the projects are. As you're working with a new member, you may help them, guide them through this to help them pick a path, and you can work through this with them on Zoom. Also on that page is a section of videos and other information. So I would encourage you to check this out. There are 5 videos. The first 4 really are for anybody who uses Pathways. They're short videos. And the first one describes getting started in Pathways. It starts with, how do you log into Toastmasters? And how do you get started in Pathways to pick a path? The first 4 videos, I would encourage you to have every new member watch, because it will help them pick a path and get through working through a project. Navigating Basecamp, how do they get around? These are some basics of how to get around. Working through a project, how do you start it? How do you take the initial assessment? How do you do the project? How do you complete a project? And then Pathways Evaluations talks a little bit about what we just talked about, how to give an evaluation. So these are for all members. If you are a Basecamp manager, the 5th video for Basecamp managers covers briefly, a lot of the things we just talked about. So it's a good reminder of steps. But in addition to these videos, there are a couple of additional links. One to a resource page, Pathways resources page for all members, and a Pathways Basecamp Manager resources page for Basecamp managers. So take just a brief look at those. This is the resources page for all members. Has links to those videos, links to the D101 page. How to print my project, which is a useful thing, I think, for all members. How do you complete a project? How do you complete a level? Where to find tutorials? All of this is handy if you are a member and want to remind yourself how to do this. So if you go to the D101 Pathways page, click on this link and you'll have all of this information people can get to. The Basecamp Manager resources page, if you are a Basecamp manager, and presumably you are if you're here, talks about the home club. These are things we've just talked about. Approving a level completion, viewing progress, selecting members from a list. We talked about all those things. Viewing the club's progress. These are just brief overviews of what we just talked about. So if you need a reminder of how to do it, you can get all those details here. And there's a couple of additional things, and one I'd like to show you just for fun because it's handy for VP Education and other club officers. Tools from Raffety and Marshall. And I gave you those links, and I'll give you the links again in a minute. Mike Rafferty and George Marshall are DTMs and past international directors and so on who have put together some websites that scrape the Toastmasters data and present it in an interesting and useful form. So if you go to the Mike Rafferty link, there's a lot of here stuff for district officials, and most of it isn't all that useful to us in a club, but the top one is Club and Area Performance Reports. If you click on Club and Area Performance Report, you'll be able to enter your club number and submit, And it doesn't have to be your club number, it could be any club number, but you look at a club number and then it shows 15 years of distinguished club program progress for that club. And every year it shows you which requirements in the DCP plan you've completed, which you haven't, your retention, how many goals you were, and whether you were a distinguished, select distinguished, or president's distinguished, or none of the above in that particular year. And you can see it shows up a graph at the top that shows how many goals were met each year and how many members there were in the club each year. It's really a handy way to see at a glance how your club is doing. A little bit further down on that page, it shows the distinguished club performance details for this year. And this one, 4 level 1s have to be completed this year. It shows what date they were completed and which project was submitted for that. So you can see at a glance what's going on in your club or whatever club you're looking at. And somebody says, is it actively updated? Yes, every day. The George Marshall resource is called Tools for Toastmasters, and there's a lot of information there. You can go play with it. But the 2 things that I think are particularly helpful, education awards by club number. So you click on club number and you can put in your club number, and do you want to see educational awards for just this year, 1 year back, 2 years, 3 years back, or all years? This one, we're going to look at this particular club, which is the Speakeasy Monterey Club, for this year and 1 year back. So we'll show 2 years worth of educational awards. So enter the club number, click on it, and it brings up a lot of details here. But you can see vaguely, the top half is the 2019-2020 year, and the bottom is the 2020-2021 year. And it shows how many awards were admitted. These are only ones that have been submitted through Club Central. So make sure that people complete their projects and you submit them so that you get credit. It shows what the award was, what the date it was submitted. And if you look at this more closely, this is for 2019. It shows the award, the date, and then who submitted it. Well, the member is not really the member number, but they've cleverly put some initials here. Now, they thought they were being secretive, but they're not. These initials are the first and last initials except reverse. So BK is really KB, that's me. And if you look down at the initials, you know who's in your club. You can look at the initials, switch them around, and you can figure out who got that award. So this is showing the awards in a particular club. Back to this screen, if you click on member, you can see all the awards for a particular member. So here you'll type in the person's name. Doesn't have to be your name. You can be anybody's name. And click on member awards for that member. And do you want to see just this year or all years back to 2003? So this is what it brings up for me. And it shows most of my awards were ascribed to the Speakeasy Monterey Club. One was ascribed to Santa Cruz Downtown Club. By the way, once somebody has completed a level, they don't have to submit the award for the DCP points to the club that they got the level submitted or the level acknowledged in. That can be a different club. So even if I'm in one club and I complete level 4 of presentation mastery, I could have another club get DCP credit for it. So people who are in multiple clubs often play around with which club is going to get credit, because some clubs generate a lot of DCP points and maybe they don't need it as much as another club that could become select or president's distinguished if they had one more. So again, this is the same information. It shows for the last 3 years, each year, which awards this particular member earned and what the date was that it was submitted. So these are all Pathways awards except for the Leadership Award, which is a different kind of award. So those resources, let me put those back in the chat, just in case people don't have those.
Ken, I will also send it in an email at the end of the session.
Excellent. Okay, are there any questions that have come up about any of that?
None at this time.
Okay. On we run. So pitfalls and challenges, where are you likely to run into problems? One of the challenges, as we know, if you are a VP of education for your club, is getting people to use the system. There aren't any magical answers to that. I think a lot of hand-holding and working through pathways with an individual member is one of the ways to do that, and helping them to be comfortable with it is an important step in getting people to use the system. But a place where a lot of people have I'll say it if I can. A lot of people have problems is completing a project. They've worked on the project, they've put together their speech, they've given their speech, they've gotten the evaluation, they've gotten the applause, they're done. Oh, they're not done. They have to tell Pathways that they're done.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how to do that, but everybody has to be familiar with do that. They have to go back into Pathways, go back into the path, go back into the project, and get to this last screen, which says assess your skills after. Now, somebody pointed out you can do this even without having done the project, but we'll assume that they've done the project. And of course, there are 6 questions that they have to answer and respond to. And it doesn't really matter whether you have made progress and gotten a better score than you did at the beginning. This is all for your information. So you fill out those 6, and when you get to filled out the last one, and the last one is always, I recognize how this project applies to my life outside of Toastmasters. Yeah. Okay, I do. So I'll submit. And when I submit, then it's complete. Then the project is marked complete in Pathways. And then you can go in and into Leadership Central and mark it complete in that website so that they get credit for it. But this is an area where a lot of people get stuck.
Ken, there is a comment about level 3 and level 4.
Right. Yeah, there is if you go back to that screen of the Pathways resources, where we had the link to Rafferty and Marshall, there was one just below that talked about you have to have you have to have been an evaluator, you have to have completed a couple of additional things in order to get from level 3 to level 4. And you're right, Pathways doesn't talk about that much. So go back and read that in that section so that you're familiar with it. People need to go into their own profile and put in the date that they've completed those things. I haven't run into that myself very often, so it's something I tend to forget about as well. Okay, kind of a summary. Setting an example. You need to be the example of Pathways in your club. You need to be somebody who works with projects, gives speeches, completes the speeches, marks them complete, and sets an example. Have somebody else give you the award, the certificate. And as we said at the very beginning, be the cheerleader in your club for Pathways so that you give all the information and can provide information and talk up Pathways as often as needed. And setting the example by going through it and watching those videos yourself so that you're familiar with what's in them. They're short videos. Being familiar with what's on those resources pages so that you can look around and make sure that people can do the steps. Encouraging them to look at the videos. So set the example, do it yourself. Because what if you don't know everything? Ask. Ask me, ask Shamali, ask anybody who is familiar with Pathways, but also Toastmasters has on the Pathways website lots and lots of tutorials. Some of them are video tutorials, some of them are click-through screen by screen tutorials, but there are a lot of tutorials. When I got started in Pathways, back when Pathways first came out, I said, how am I going to be able to teach this unless I know what to do? I went through every single tutorial that there was. Some of them aren't all that interesting, but some of them are. And if you find the ones that are for a particular area that people are having trouble with, see what Pathways suggests as step by step. So these are just a way to keep on top of things in Pathways so that you continually add to your own knowledge and can help add to the knowledge in others. I think we're just about done here. Are there any other questions that people have?
None at this time.